Hi, everyone. My name is Sherry, and welcome to the podcast called the Social Profit Institute. It's here that we're discussing some alternative ways of organizing ourselves, both our businesses and as a society, in order to have it work out better for the larger social whole, as opposed to shareholders who own stocks and corporations. It's kind of about all of us having shares in what really happens in the commons that belong to all of us. So that's what this podcast is for. It's not about proposing solutions. It's about looking at possible alternatives that will allow you a chance to come up with your own ideas about what seems a reasonable solution for organizing ourselves to have better outcomes for the social good. So with me today is Linda Stier. Linda's got a long career working with co-ops, and co-ops represent a very different way of organizing social systems and businesses. And I might just have Linda start by telling us a little bit about what is a co-op, what's it all about, and how do they work?
Well, thank you, Sherry, and welcome everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in this podcast. I think my biggest experience, I've consulted with co-ops in the field of governance and them having very effective governing boards of directors that would empower their management and fulfill their mission. However, my love of and participation is 30 years with Weaver Street Market that celebrates its 30th year anniversary this year. And just seeing the evolution of what began as an idea of the cooperative that, in a particular kind of cooperative, in that if you have the people who buy a share, as the community, and employees who buy a share as those who are actually operating the cooperative, but that there is a worker and consumer owned business. So it is for the community and by the community. Profits stay within the community. Community comes together in terms of what it is that they would like to see get accomplished, and the economic engine, the vehicle, is this business that is a food marketplace. I think it took a while from the first, this abstract idea to begin with. Let's create this consumer and worker-owned cooperative and get moving with it. And by the time just trying to get the grocery operational business going, this idea of also how do workers as owners play into this took quite a number of years to come to, because initially it was just getting this business up and going and all of the various challenges of having that happen. So it's great being able to look back over the 30 years and begin to see what kind of real impact that kind of collaboration can make. I'll just stop there, and I could keep on going, but
But there's a very interesting way of organizing a business system. I mean, it's a business operation in terms of having it benefit not only those who are shareholders from the community, but also the worker owners as well, and integrating those two interests. Have you encountered any challenges with that model, Linda? Do worker owners have different priorities than community owners?
They do, and it took a while, to say that, okay, we're worker and consumer owned. So I think initially there was a conceptual thought of relating to them in a similar way. These are people who are vested in the organization doing well and the mission getting fulfilled. But the biggest challenge was that we could not treat, the worker owners are a subset of the employee base, all of whom, report ultimately to the general manager. So, how do you separate out being an employee, getting work done, reporting through a chain of managers, and then also employees thinking of themselves as owners, wanting to actually have a say in workforce decisions, create a bit of a conundrum, as you might imagine. So I think as it's evolved over time and at the board level, beginning to recognize we're dealing with apples and oranges here. We're not dealing with a similar owner base. So from a consumer owner standpoint, while consumers get a dividend from the amount of purchase that they buy of product during the course of the year, that's where the dividend is based on. And with the workers, it's based on hours worked to the degree that they would get a dividend. It's two wholly different relationships to ownership. So with a consumer owner, it's not I don't relate to myself as I'm a consumer owner. I don't relate to myself as a shareholder in a business about what I'm getting from me, but I recognize that I'm part of a collective ownership of the community. And while I might get an individual dividend off of how much I purchased during the course of the year, fundamentally, much of that dividend is held, 80% of it is held for the good of the whole. Now,
that's a very interesting idea, Linda, because we had an opportunity to speak a couple of weeks ago, and in the conversation, you mentioned how your general manager was working to ensure that the interests and benefits could accrue to the larger community in some way, that they had some way to input what was going on with Weaver Street, so that you're basically being more inclusive of not only the people who are employees of the organization, but also, and the consumers who benefit from their share of ownership in it. But he broadened it out to get some input from the larger community. Could you tell us a little bit more about that and how that works?
I could, and I'd love the opportunity just to come back around as far as how the worker owners, as owners, what that looks like as an individual. But in terms of the larger, we're involved right now in, we're expanding into another city, but here's a prime example. So Weaver Street Market's located in the center of Carver, which is just on the outskirts border of Chapel Hill in North Carolina. And we're afforded out in front of the store this amazing piece of property between Weaver Street and the street, which was a lawn with huge trees that have been there for, about 100 years, large, big, shady lawn out front. That for a grocery store at the very beginning of Weaver Street originating was liability, because usually what you see about grocery stores is the best thing is concrete parking up to the door. But we use this as an advantage because it created such a prime community gathering place. You could be owners or not owners, but it's much like a town square. And it is owned by the management of the adjacent mall. So we don't own that land, but it's obviously a key asset for the co-op, and part of the co-op's mission is that we are a downtown gathering place, as of the old marketplaces years ago, where people would bring food and product and convene, and that was where socialization happened. So it's a very key part, even though we don't own it. So the manager, it was that we're told the mall management, without any benefit to us one way or the other regarding our lease rent, is that we're going to take responsibility for that. We're subject to their regulations and they carry the liability, but we're going to be responsible for it. And just yesterday, I attended what was an open gathering. Sundays are hugely busy out on the lawn around noontime, with brunch happening, and just a multi-generational with college students and retirees and young families with dogs and young kids. And, they have picnic tables out under the trees. And one of the things that we've been dealing with is that the trees are aging. There's an erosion issue, trying to put grass down. So Weaver Street, through the general manager, hired a landscape contractor, and also with some renovations for the store that would be in conjunction with it, and held a public gathering. We were soliciting input on this sort of draft plan and what people thought of it from the users of that place, right? So that in presenting this now to the town aldermen over the next year, in requesting any physical changes as there's a widening of a public sidewalk happening, that we've demonstrated that we've gotten solicited input from the general public at large. But this is a public gathering place. And it's an example over the 30 years where the store has collaborated with the town about what's happening outside of it, as we're committed to a vibrant downtown. There are a lot of very small businesses that have popped up along the same general Main Street area, the Main Street and Weaver Street Market in Carborough, as a result of this being kind of a social place for people to connect. If I were going to create an analogy, I think often of corporations that can be very black box or closed, and they serve a shareholder base that they may be all over the world for that matter, and they produce a product, and their interaction with the public is through that product, and they may be socially aware and contributing to certain charities and being good corporate citizens. I would say that as a cooperative has actually is its eyes out here in the community and what the community needs, and where can we as an economic engine contribute to what maybe government can't do in making a difference. And that's, I think, the fundamental main project with Weaver Street is collaboration with local food kitchens and serving those who are challenged from having sufficient nutrition, and have an ongoing rounding up program that has raised hundreds of thousands of dollars just as you go through the cash register and your purchase is $23.82, and you round up, and it just becomes an even number, and hundreds of thousands of dollars that have funneled their way back through those organizations, what we call Food Insecure. And it has funded backpacks for kids during the summer. It a phenomenal, just an amazing kind of contribution for the size of the co-op, which runs about $35 million business.
Thanks, Linda. So I think that offers an opportunity to segue back to what you wanted to circle back to regarding the worker owners, is that you're not only providing a great environment for the community and a place for community gathering and being and positively impacting the community. I would think that affects the worker owners as well in terms of their enjoyment of working there, of being part of that, and it changes their perspective in terms of how their involvement in work environment is. So do you want to circle back to that and talk about that a little bit?
I'd be happy to. As I spoke to consumer owners relating to being part of a community, being part of a whole, that for the worker owners, the benefits are literally theirs. So they have individual accounts from their dividends, so there's an initial payout, but the retained earnings for worker owners, they have in their own personal accounts that they own, and if they leave the organization at some point, they can take with them. So it is about benefiting the workers from a literally an individual financial standpoint. And they have a worker owner leadership with two board members who are instrumental in forming leading huddles, various department huddles, that is about employees being knowledgeable about where their job connects into the greater whole, and that they have an input into helping determine what internal projects get done. That's sort of distinct from what needs to be clear operational effectiveness. So they are still responsible for reporting to their managers and so forth, and the way that they would know to impact anything having to do with what's actually happening operational is through their board, through the board. But Weaver Street, it takes on challenges that, and it takes the cooperation of both the employees and management and worker owners and the whole community about what we're up to, that we could reduce margin and increase wages and reduce margin simultaneously, which tends to be unheard of in business. But we're saying, hey, how could we possibly do that if, we work more efficiently and still benefit people? So Weaver Street is the first grocery store of this nature who is certified by the local county in being a living wage employer. That is wow. That what is determined as a living wage, that from the lowest paid full-time clerk up through management, that people are earning a living wage.
So that brings me to something that we're hearing that I picked up in the chat room. You are doing things quite different from your competition. Do you have any sense of what the competition thinks about you?
I don't actually. One of the interesting phenomena that we found with doing some recent branding as we open into a new market, basically it's a first time in a neighboring county and in the capital of North Carolina, Raleigh, where government is a slightly different demographic. So we've done some branding work. And in the course of that, we had to identify ourselves with some sector, as they usually do branding kind of analysis. So we needed to associate with what might be those grocery stores that are similar kind of products. And yet, from our general manager's standpoint, he is oriented towards having us unique. As he said, however many, 30, 40 years ago when co-ops were the granola, the granola Birkenstock crew with natural and organic foods has become mainstream. And his philosophy is that whatever's become mainstream, that now is on a distribution truck that anybody can get the same product off of and sell the same product, is that it's time for us to invent the new dog. And so he is focused on what is locally made, what's made in the food house that we own and created. So where all the bread is baked and product is made, if we make our own product, then it can't be replicated. So even though we're connected with the grocery market, we're the only ones that are going to find ourselves in small size stores in downtown settings, creating community and having the particular focus we have, which is rather unique. So to answer your question simply, I'm not quite sure what they think about it. I do know very early on, when Whole Foods first moved on the east side of Chapel Hill, I don't even know quite how many years ago, but some things would begin to get replicated over there. This was before Amazon and before they were more locally focused, but some things would begin happening over there that were copying what was being done at Weaver Street. So I guess that's the best of compliments.
Absolutely. What Weaver Street is doing, and I should mention that Linda's speaking to us from North Carolina. You might have heard a reference to Raleigh and Chapel Hill. It's an amazing model for doing business that not only benefits those who are consumers and gives them a benefit of better prices, better quality. That's what I'm hearing, and also gives better quality of life for employees of the co-op, but contributes greatly to the greater community. And I want to thank Linda for offering such wonderful pictures of what life with a co-op in your community can look like, and it's definitely an alternative that may be out there that we'll be exploring in future episodes. So we'll be looking at other types of co-ops. So we invite you to subscribe to our podcast and definitely visit our website. And I appreciate you all joining us today. Thank you very much. And thank you, Linda. Wonderful.
Thank you, Sherry.